Hello, this is Lord's Legion, and welcome to the best villains ever. The show in which I talk about a specific villain and talk about their backstories, abilities, greatest feats, and why I love them so much. Now this one was originally going to celebrate the original release of the New Mutants, but you know, that got pushed back, and honestly I just wanted to do this villain anyway purely because I feel like he's pretty underrated. And it has been a little while since the last Marvel villain, so you know, there's that as well. And the villain in question is of course the Juggernaut. So without further ado, let's begin with his backstory. Now when King Marco was very young, his mother passed away and he was raised by his father, Kurt. But with the questionable death of his father's colleague, Dr. Brian Xavier, Kane's father married Xavier's widow, Sharon. After their marriage, Kurt alongside his son Marco eventually moved to the Xavier Mansion, which would be later known as Xavier Institute for Higher Learning. However, things start to become complicated as Kane's very own father prefers Charles Xavier over his own flesh and blood. And as a result, King Marco decides to bully Charles, mostly out of jealousy, as Charles was clearly shown to be more bright in comparison to Kane. During an argument with his own father, Kane accidentally started a fire in his father's lab. As the fire grew, Kurt decided to save Charles first before Kane. And just before Kurt died, Kane had discovered that Charles Xavier is actually a mutant who has been reading people's minds the entire time, as to which enraged King Marco. Years later, both Kane and Charles were drafted into the US Army and were also in the same unit during the Korean War. And during one of the missions, both Kane and Charles stumbled across a cave that had the lost temple of Sidorak inside. And it was in fact King Marco who stumbled across the Crimson Gem of Sidorak. Now for those who don't know who Sidorak is, all you really need to know is the fact that Sidorak is an extremely powerful demon who only craves for destruction. And whoever gains the Crimson Gem of Sidorak will automatically become Sidorak's new avatar and will have a fraction of his power. As soon as King Marco gained the Crimson Gem of Sidorak himself, the cave began to collapse itself onto King Marco, and Charles Xavier did manage to escape just in time. And before the dust has been settled, everyone assumed that King Marco was in fact dead. But this was far from the truth, because thanks to the powers of Sidorak, King Marco actually survived the rubble. And with his newfound powers, he decided to take on the mantle of the Juggernaut. And once he got out of the surface, he had one only objective in mind. That of course to exact his revenge on Charles Xavier. Now looking back on Juggernaut's origin story, he does have a lot of similarities between himself, Loki, Maximus, as well as several other Marvel villains, in that they do have their own sibling rivalry, and how their other brother was more beloved than them. And although the Juggernaut's origin story is very simplistic, at the same time you do understand where he's coming from, and you can understand as to why he is always fueled by his own rage. Now it's no secret that the Juggernaut has a lot of powers and abilities at his disposal. For starters, he has incalculable strength and could easily rival the Hulk. But not only that, he also has limitless stamina, so therefore he could never get tired. Not to mention he also has invulnerability, and despite his massive size, he also does have superhuman speed as well. But not only that, the Juggernaut also has a very rapid healing factor, as well as self-sustenance, meaning that he doesn't have to drink, eat, or even sleep, as well as contamination immunity, therefore meaning that he can't get poisoned. And to an extent, the Juggernaut even has immortality. But along with that, the Juggernaut also has an invisible force field around his body, but above all else, he is an irresistible force embodiment, meaning that so long as the Juggernaut keeps on moving, he can almost never be stopped. And thanks to his Crimson Cosmos armor, the Juggernaut also has psychic resistance as well. And depending on how much power the Juggernaut takes on, he also has the additional abilities of size manipulation, levitation, energy absorption, and can even create portals. Although King Marco hasn't exactly mastered any of them abilities. Now over the years, the Juggernaut has achieved plenty of incredible feats, and there's only so much for me to mention in one video, so I'm going to narrow it down to the most impressive out of all of the feats throughout the years. For starters, the Juggernaut is capable of going toe to toe with World War Hulk, as to which is one of the most powerful versions of the Hulk. He is also capable of taking down Thor in a one-on-one fight. Also, the Juggernaut's punches are so devastating that he could actually make Scar bleed. Not to mention that the Juggernaut kicked the Hulk so hard in fact that he almost broke his neck. And he also briefly took down the Stranger, who is supposedly on par with Galactus. He also has the ability to take down Captain Britain, who is on a pretty similar power level to that of the Juggernaut himself. Plus his punches are that devastating that he could even make Colossus bleed. How that was possible is beyond me. He can also casually toss tanks like they're nothing, as well as holding off a collapsing skyscraper. Plus his thunderclaps are so powerful that he could easily take down the whole team of Generation X. The Juggernaut can also stun Thor and could even knock out Mjolnir out of his hand, as well as creating an earthquake that can actually destroy a cliff from the valley that he was in. The Juggernaut is that durable in fact that he could easily take on Thor's most powerful ability, that being the God Blast. He can also take a hit from Cyclops' most powerful version of his Optic Blast, and can even take several blows from Mjolnir, right to the face no less, and could even dish out several hits from the Hulk himself, and could even carry on fighting without so much of a struggle, and could even tank a blow from Rogue, who is debatably one of the most physically powerful mutants in the X-Men roster, and his armor and skin are so solid that not even Wolverine's adamantium claws can cut him. And while the Juggernaut was charging, he could easily bypass both Cyclops' Optic Blast as well as Marvel Gale's telekinesis. His mental resistance is so good in fact that not even Captain Universe can go through his mind. And the Juggernaut's invisible shield is so good in fact that Mjolnir can't even hit him, but instead halts before turning away from the Juggernaut. The Juggernaut's healing factor is so impressive that once he was reduced to just a skeleton, he could easily regenerate back into perfect condition within a matter of seconds. And when Sidorak granted the Juggernaut more power, he could punch through the fabric of time-space. Not to mention that at one point the Juggernaut was granted the powers of Captain Universe. And the most impressive of them all is the fact that the Juggernaut was empowered by Kirth the Breaker of Stone. And thanks to his hammer, he was granted even more power than before. Over the years, the Juggernaut has appeared in other mediums, such as the 90s X-Men cartoon, in which the Juggernaut is mostly a cocky idiot and is more of a lackey than anything else. Which, to be fair, the Juggernaut is never really seen as the most intelligent guy in the universe. And he also appears in X-Men Evolution, which as far as my memory goes, he is a lot more intimidating and is more of a loner. And his grudge against Charles Xavier is still very much present. And he also had a pretty minor role in Wolverine and the X-Men, in which he was going to have a much bigger role within the second season before it was cancelled. Not to mention that the Juggernaut also appeared in the Ultimate Comics, where in this version, he is very much a mutant, while in the main continuity, the Juggernaut's powers are pretty much magical. And lastly, the Juggernaut did appear in X-Men The Last Stand, played by Vinnie Jones. And well, he's the Juggernaut, bitch. Now in the end, the Juggernaut isn't necessarily a complex villain by any means, but as we've seen previously, some of the more basic villains can actually have their own charm to them. And sure, one could compare Juggernaut to someone like Broly, but at the very least with the Juggernaut, he actually does have some personality, and you can actually understand where he's coming from. And the best way to describe the Juggernaut is the fact that he is both an unstoppable force and an immovable object. And despite how the Juggernaut is mostly defined by his sheer power, he is also pretty charming in his own little way. So because of his very simplistic yet understanding backstory, as well as just how powerful he really is, not to mention how much of a fun villain he really is, and above all else his charming personality, this is why I personally believe that the Juggernaut is one of the best villains of all time. So are you a fan of the Juggernaut, and what are some of your favourite storylines revolving around this particular villain? Comment below and share some thoughts. And as always, thank you guys for watching this video. Please like and subscribe. Take care and have a good one.